One of the most common things I hear from people that are moving to the greater Dayton area, especially from higher cost markets, is, well, I'm going to live like a king in the greater Dayton area, right? And listen, I get it. The houses here are cheap, or at least more affordable compared to where you may be moving from. And that's practically true if you're looking at just things on the surface level. But what I'll do today in today's video is actually show you the real math. Not just the Zillow math or the Zillow estimate. Not the mortgage calculator that leaves out half the costs. The actual monthly payment that you have when you move to Dayton. And I want to show that to you at 3 different price points and exactly what type of salary you have to have if you're moving to the greater Dayton area you need for each one of these price points. Because I actually think some of you might be a little bit surprised. So here's the thing. My name is David Moyer. I'm with Keller Williams Advisors in Dayton, Ohio. I've been a lifelong resident of the greater Dayton area, grew up in Springboro, class of 1997, graduated from Rice State University, class of 2001, and I've been a licensed real estate agent for over 21 years. And in those 21 years, I've watched buyers make the same mistake over and over and over again. They look at listings online, they do some really quick mental math, and they say, okay, 20% down, the mortgage rate's around 6.5%. Sure, I can swing that, right? And then they jump in, and then by the time closing day comes or they get really into it, they start to look at the monthly payment and they go, hey, this is hundreds of dollars more than what I was expecting or what they planned for, and then all of a sudden their entire plan blows up in the water. Now, before I break down the numbers, I'm going to give you 3 specific price points with real math. There's something you need to understand about how mortgage payments actually work here in Ohio that may be a little bit different from a lot of other states. So, the biggest thing is the property taxes. And you may be thinking, David, I understand property taxes, but believe me, I've been doing relocation for a long time. That's how I started my career, and property taxes were the biggest thing that really stepped up to the plate and confused a lot of my clients coming here from out of state. So let's dive into it. All right, so let's actually start off with an entry point, because I think that's fair. An entry point here in the greater Dayton area is right around $250,000, give or take. And that's a nice starter home in a decent neighborhood. So think somewhere around Kettering, Ohio, Huber Heights, maybe even parts of Beaver Creek if you get lucky, right? Now, here's what most people assume. Like I said before, they think, okay, 20% down on a $250,000 home, that's $50,000. And so they finance $200,000. They say, let's say 6.58%, which is where we're at right now on about a 30-year fixed rate as of this week when I'm recording this video. And that's about a $275 a month principal payment with your interest included, right? And I can handle that. And you're not wrong on that part. So that's the principal and interest. But here's where that gets added on top. Property taxes in Montgomery County, the effective rate right now is 1.72. That's the average. It can be a little bit less and it can be a little bit more. And in some places it can be a lot more. So in a $250,000 home, you're looking at about $4,300 a year in property taxes. So right off the bat, that's another $358 a month on top of what you've already calculated. So then you also have your homeowner's insurance. But realistically, a budget of around $150 to $175 a month for homeowner's insurance for a home this size, that's realistic at this price point. So now we're roughly at right around $1,790 a month for that same property. Already $500 more than the principal and interest alone that you were fixated on based off of that Zillow calculator. Here's the kicker, and this is where a lot of first-time home buyers get caught up in the minutia of things without doing their research or without sitting down with someone like me and actually having a consultation first or with one of my lenders. If you are not putting down 20% necessarily on that loan, and most first-time home buyers aren't. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of second, third-time home buyers that aren't putting 20% down. You are potentially paying 9 times out of 10 what's called PMI. That is private mortgage insurance. And that's typically between 0.5 and 1% of your loan amount per year, spaced out over 12 months. So on a $225,000 loan with, let's say, 10% down, that could be another $140 to $190 a month. So now your actually monthly payment with 10% down on that $250,000 home, you're actually looking at around $2,100 a month. So That's wildly different than what we thought we were starting with, right? So now the old rule of thumb is that your housing payment shouldn't exceed 28% of your gross income. So at $2,100 a month, you need to be earning, before taxes, about $90,000 a year in the greater Dayton area. And that's for a starter home. Now let's move up to $400,000 for that property. This is where you start getting into a really nice home in a top school district. And like I said before in other videos, there are really no bad school districts in the greater Dayton area, but some of your top school districts are Beaver Creek, Centerville, Springboro. This is where you're going to find your 4 bedrooms, probably 2,500 to 3,000 square feet, potentially newer construction or something that's at least fully updated. So same math applies, just a different scale. So with 10% down on this $400,000 property, so let's say $40,000 down, you're financing $360,000 principal and interest at 6.58%. So you're looking at roughly $2,295, $2,295 a month. However, property taxes on a $400,000 home in Montgomery County, you're looking at around $6,880 a year. So that's around $573 a month. Insurance now, let's figure about $200 a month on average, give or take, right? PMI on that loan right there, that's another $225 or so. So now your monthly payment on that $400,000 property becomes $3,300 a month. And at that 28% threshold we talked about just prior, for a $400,000 home, typically, you need a household income right around $141,000 a year before tax. Maybe $135,000 to $145,000 a year, depending on exactly where the rate lands and where your credit score is. So if that rate's a little bit lower, that could vary a little bit different there as well. Now here's where I want to pause and I want to give you some context, right? Because I think this is important. The median household income right now in Montgomery County is somewhere in the low 60s. So a $400,000 home with 10% down, that's a 2-income professional household. 2 teachers in the Centerville School District could probably make it work. A nurse at Wright Pat, a civilian employee, absolutely, right? But a single buyer, unless you're a pretty high earner in your field, aerospace engineering, medical, senior military, something like that, that's a bit of a stretch. But more than likely, that could be why you're relocating here to the greater Dayton area as well. So, and that's not the story people want to hear when they talk about how affordable Dayton is. But that's also why I like to stand out a little bit from my colleagues, and I like to be the realtor that likes to tell you some of the things that may be a little bit uncomfortable, but the facts matter at the end of the day. And by the way, if you're PCSing to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and you have a BAH factored in, I've done a separate video just recently that posted last week that does all of this math specifically that can help actually offset a lot of this as well. I'll link it below. BAH changes the equation dramatically. All right, top tier time at $600,000. At this price point in Dayton, you're in Oakwood, or other areas too, but I like to talk about Oakwood. You're in the nicest part of Springboro as well, and some of the nicer part of Beaver Creek. You're probably looking at a 3,500 square foot or more, and maybe new construction even, premium finishes, larger lots, all of the bells and whistles that you would hope to have at this price point. So with 10% down, you're looking at $60,000, financing roughly around $540,000. So your principal and interest right there, that's around $3,445 a month. So your property taxes on a home around this size and around this price point in Montgomery County is going to be roughly around $10,320 a year. That's just on average. So that's $860 a month right there just in property taxes. Let's talk about the insurance, $250 a month, and that's on the low end. And we're going back to the PMI again, that's $340 a month. So right away, all in, you're writing a check every single month for right around $4,900 a month. So the income needed at a 28% threshold, if you're in this price point, that's right around $210,000 a year, if that's the home that you're buying. So that's just something to take into consideration if that's the price point that you are looking to purchase. But more than likely, if you're in that price point, a lot of my buyers are putting down at least 20% more, or they have a special type of financing. And here's the thing, if you're a dual income household with 2 professionals living under one roof, especially if you're near the base or if you're a senior role at one of the hospitals around here, we're very well known for our medical facilities, or if you're in one of the great aerospace firms which are booming right now in the greater Dayton area, that's extremely doable. But it's at the top end of Dayton's market for a reason. Most buyers at this price points are putting down more than 20 or 25%. They're coming in with equity from a much larger city and from a previous home. So that's why it's making Dayton so affordable for them. Now, before I wrap this up with my honest take, I'm going to tell you what I actually do at each one of these price points, right? So stay tuned. First, yes, Dayton is more affordable than most of the country. There's no denying that whatsoever. The same $400,000 home right here in Dayton, Ohio, in the greater Dayton area, may cost you $700,000 even in Columbus, just to the northeast of us, or $900,000 in a coastal market. So that is real, and that is the math, and those are facts. Affordability doesn't necessarily mean easy. At today's rates, around 6.58%, your buying power is a little bit more compressed than it was maybe a year to 2 years ago, right? At $2,100 a month budget, that got you a $350,000 home 3 years ago. Today, it gets you around a $250,000 home. The rates can change the game dramatically. So here's what I would do. If I was a first-time home buyer today, I'd be looking in the $250,000 to $325,000 range. From there, I'd be trying to put down at least 10%. And then I'd be laser focused on neighborhoods where the property taxes aren't eating me alive, because not every single Montgomery County suburb taxes are the same and they have the exact same effective rate. They're not identical next to each other over and over. And I'm happy to sit down and tell you which ones vary next to one another. They're not apples to apples. In fact, they're apples to oranges. And that 0.5% difference adds up to real money over the course of 30 years. And if I was moving up, selling a starter home, maybe buying something a little bit bigger, that's where the $400,000 to $500,000 range makes sense, because you've got equity that you're rolling up to those price points. And if I were transferring in, coming from a high-cost market, sitting on maybe $200,000 in equity from a house in California or Washington, D.C., honestly, that $600,000 price point here in Dayton is still going to feel like a bargain, right? But you still need the income to support the payments month to month to month. One more thing before I go. The numbers I gave you today are based off the rates that I actually have today when I'm recording this video. Rates move. And right now I'm recording this video in July of 2026. They go up and they go down. They change all the time. And when they do, that math changes. So do not make a decision based on the YouTube video you're watching today if it is 6 months past the date I just gave you, or 6 months, 7 months have gone by, including this one. Make sure you get the current numbers before you do anything. Talk to a lender. Talk to an agent who actually knows the market and knows where things are starting to move. Once again, my name is David Moyer with Keller Williams Advisors in Dayton, Ohio. I've been a lifelong resident here in the greater Dayton area. Once again, I'm a licensed full-time real estate agent, have been for well over 21 years. If this was helpful, make sure you share it with somebody else. Make sure you like and subscribe. Once again, share it with someone who's thinking about making a move to greater Dayton area or thinking about getting into their first property ever, because the American dream is still alive and well, especially here in Dayton, Ohio. I'll see you in the next one.